Welcome to the Institute of African American Males. Don't forget to drop a like and subscribe.
All right, moving along. National identity. So, racial consciousness is part of the United States. And our national identity has a lot to do with race. Like many countries, consciousness framed around nationalism often highlights issues of ethnicity and racial consciousness. The Black scholar W.E.B. Du Bois articulated in the U.S., blacks can conceptualize two identities. One as a member of a people who have been oppressed, and the other as a person newly freed from slavery that he describes as a double consciousness. Du Bois asserts that double consciousness serves as a critical reflection of race relations from a unique moral perspective. So why did I talk about the double consciousness? Because that goes back again to our duality. And so what we had, folks who signed, who created the Constitution, and also the Declaration of Independence. But we all know Declaration of Independence and the Constitution were not very favorable to people of color. African Americans, Native Americans were actually called savages, right? So in the formation of in the documents that created and formed the United States, there's racism embedded. So when people say, hey, why is everyone talking about race? Because race is part of the history of the United States, and it hasn't really been fleshed out the way it was fleshed out. So when we had the 4th of July, right, American independence, remember I celebrated, in my mind, I was in the States, but in my mind, the first 4th of July, I was in England, different perspective. Right? So we have the 4th of July in celebration. There's a guy named Frederick Douglass that you may have heard of. Frederick Douglass was a black man who was born a slave. He wound up escaping. But while he was little, before he escaped, he would take pieces of food from his plate and he would sell it to white children, selling his food so they could teach him how to read. So he went from a slave child to wind up, he did so many different things. He worked for the Treasury Office, he was an ambassador, he spoke around the world, he wound up going to England. All the things behind Frederick Douglass are absolutely amazing. If you ever want to read an interesting person, it's Frederick Douglass did. So we have the thought behind a new planet, right? Because what happened from the Declaration of Independence, it formed a new way of thinking because you had a bunch of white men get together, sit down, and come up with an idea and say, you don't have to have a king to have a country. That had never happened before. That was revolutionary. No king. You don't have to have a king. That was an amazing concept that was created by white men. Never happened before in the history of the planet, right? And if you think about what happened with our Constitution, that has affected places all the way around the world. UN, places in Brazil, having a constitution and having a democratic process, although democracy had been invented before, making it into a country or making it into a document that could govern a country was revolutionary. Declaration of Independence, that's an amazing thought. But hold on, Frederick Douglass stopped and said, hey, what to a slave is the 4th of July? You talk about freedom and independence. Freedom and independence at certain times in the United States meant different things for whites and different things for blacks. For whites, it meant freedom from blue bloods, from having kings and being a serf. Because being a serf, you were a peasant. You couldn't really own very much money. Most of the time, you didn't even own your land. And whenever the king came by, you had to stop and do whatever the king told you to do. Sometimes you had to fight in armies that you didn't want to fight. So changing this thought is revolutionary. All right, so let's get that straight. Remember that. Frederick Douglass said, hey, well, wait a minute. If freedom is to be truly free, then for blacks, we need to be free as well. Right? So what became African Americans later, right? The Negro at the time Their thought and conceptualization of freedom were different than whites. So it's a double consciousness. It's a way of looking at yourself as a former slave who was enslaved, but also at the same time, are you an American? The reason why I started with my story about my time in the UK is because I had never thought of myself as an American when I was living in the United States. As I live here in the United States, I'm Black. As a child, I was Black. I think about being Black. But when I'm in Europe, I'm an American. When I go to Canada, I'm an American. But in the United States, I don't feel or think of myself as an American. It's a double consciousness, looking at things in two ways. You start to see a pattern there, duality, right? Looking at things from two perspectives. So one of the things that happens when you have a double consciousness, when you can see two different things, or see the same thing from two different perspectives, right? It changes your persona, right? So when we look at a mask, right? Some people call that the Black male cool pose. It's kind of like the Black, yeah. But it's not something that's just adopted by Black males. The cool pose is something that's adopted by a lot of males. And that plays a big role with regards to masculinity. The mask that you wear, being tough, being strong, and how that's projected. So we have the national identity, double consciousness, and cool pose. But what is important to remember, right? That there's a double consciousness, two ways of looking at things. But in the United States, they had, well, before I talk about that, just very briefly, how many of you knew that African Americans were the first slaves in the United States? Who were the first slaves in the United States? Native Americans? Irish. The first slaves in the United States were not African Americans, were not Native Americans, or what became Native Americans. It was Irish. Matter of fact, there were so many Irish at one time. I think it was like 1,500 came in like a short period of time, in like a couple of years. This guy named Cromwell, he basically sold some of his folks. There was a famine, so a whole bunch of stuff happened. So he kicked a whole lot of Irish folks and sold. Most of them got sold, a lot of them got sold to the South America, plantation down there, and then they also came to the United States. And there were so many Irish that they made a law saying that blacks couldn't own slaves because blacks were owning and buying white people. We also had Native Americans who had white slaves, but they also had black slaves as well. Their slavery was a little bit different, right? So the conceptualization of what we have as far as what we think of who was slaves, it was not. But another important thing to remember is that the first instances, you may have heard of something called affirmative action. The first instances of affirmative action were when whites who were indentured servants and also poor protested against the white landowners because they would buy or purchase slaves and not pay them. Right? So it was cheaper to have a black slave than it was to hire a white person. So the first instances that we have of affirmative action was to support whites, not blacks. So interesting, what does this have to do with black males? Well, it has to do with the duality between the two, what we think of racial consciousness is, and our formation of race in the United States. And here's the kicker. Poor whites at one time were often not better off than most slaves. What changed? There was a couple of rebellions. And that's when whites and blacks got together and they protested, they burned stuff down, they tried to take over, and then they said, oh, no, can't have that anymore. And the first thing that happened to stop this plays a big role into racial consciousness, is they said, blacks and whites, poor white, you may not be rich, but at least you're not the N-word. And so that division of that N-word plays a role to not only just your race, but your social class. Because you could be born white, but that meant that you still were not black and the N-word. That made a big difference. So what would it look like in the United States if blacks and whites in the United States got together, united, joined unions, joined together in coalitions, and worked together? Because it's not all white people that own the money. Very small handful of white folks that own the money. Most of the white folks don't own money. Most of us in the room are pretty much the same social class.
Thanks for joining us at the Institute of African American Male. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe.